Thank you for that kind and thoughtful introduction, Dr. Chance. It was so incredibly meaningful to me. President Walls, faculty and staff, family, friends, distinguished guests, and my fellow Citation of Achievement honorees. It is with great humility and a profound sense of gratitude that I stand here before you today to accept this Citation of Achievement. I'm the daughter of two extraordinary immigrants who left behind everything familiar and safe to build a life in a land that offered them nothing more than a glimmer of possibility. My parents' heartfelt belief was that in this great country they had chosen to call home, there was nothing their daughters could not do, be, or experience. I know without a doubt that if my parents could be here today, they would be beaming with pride and joy at seeing me receive this honor. And while I miss them both terribly, I take comfort in knowing that their many sacrifices and the values that they instilled continue to guide me every day. In my 2019 Oxbridge High Table remarks, I asked the attendees to imagine that every moment of our lives is represented by a thin black line. And at any given moment, we're either operating from above the line or below the line. When we're operating from above the line, we're open, curious, non-judgmental, committed to learning and acting with intention. When we're below the line, we're closed off, defensive, digging in our heels, and only committed to being right. While most of us would like to operate from above the line as often as possible, it's the awareness and discernment to recognize from where we are operating at a given moment that actually creates the capacity for change. One of my first exposures to above-the-line thinking was at William Jewell during my second semester freshman year in Dr. Chance's Intro to the Bible course. I remember walking into this class with a lot of narrow-minded beliefs about what I was certain would be a class espousing Christian values that I was sure were different from my own Hindu ones. My plan was to just check this requirement off the list and move on with my life. But then something curious happened. I found myself in a class with a professor who asked questions, who encouraged debate and discussion about biblical interpretation, who modeled critical thinking while broadening my views and encouraging me to explore religion from different viewpoints, who challenged my perspectives with curiosity and without judgment. Dr. Chance's class was a safe space that held me open to recognize that there exists within each of us a form of humanity that transcends any particular religion, holy book, or God to whom we pray. What I've learned over the years since then is that opportunities to work with above-the-line thinkers like Dr. Chance are not a certainty in our schools, workplaces, or communities. In fact, in many ways, our institutions are unintentionally designed to create below-the-line mindsets. Things like competition, comparison, lack of transparency, and inequitable power structures are just a few of the things that can easily move us below the line, stifling our creativity along the way, and keeping us disconnected from each other at a basic human level. I've spent the majority of my career traveling around the world, and what I've learned is that irrespective of geographic location or perceived differences, our desire to be seen and celebrated, to feel valued and connected to purpose, and to be treated with dignity and respect are part of a shared and common humanity. Fundamental to who we are as human beings is a desire to belong. But here's the thing. Belonging cannot exist as long as we dehumanize individuals and groups that we consciously or unconsciously view as different from us. We may want to believe that dehumanization is something that only occurs during times of war or conflict and only in other parts of the world. But when the founding fathers memorialized their refusal to recognize entire segments of our society as whole human beings, dehumanization became the foundation upon which this country was built, and which continues to put up barriers and hold down entire segments of our society to this day. We see it happening right now in what noted scholar John C. Powell refers to as othering. We see subtle forms of othering show up in schools and workplaces as inequities in the hiring process and the admissions process, in a lack of diversity on leadership teams and in boardrooms. We see and experience othering in its extreme forms in our communities through hate crimes, mass incarceration, lack of access to health care and clean water, racial profiling, voter suppression, the list goes on. The underlying message of othering is that it's only okay to be one kind of human in this place. And if you're different, you don't belong. It creates a dangerous narrative, a single story that doesn't recognize intersectionality and how multiple forms of oppression are often experienced simultaneously in ways that make them inextricable from each other. As researcher Mary Maxfield, referencing the groundbreaking work of law professor Kimberly Crenshaw notes, it's only when we can see the ways that racism, sexism, and all the other isms are fusing together in particular ways that we can challenge them effectively. It's when we start to learn the history of oppression in the US, not as a single series of separate stories, but as a cluster of interlocking ones, that we can begin to challenge them. And though we may not feel personally responsible for the negative consequences these narratives have produced over the past 400 plus years, they are now ours to unravel together. And regardless of the narratives on which we choose to focus, the through line that connects them all is a desire to belong. I share this today because we find ourselves at a pivotal moment in our collective history, where we have an opportunity to shift away from existing cultures of systemic othering and to move towards building cultures of universal belonging, where awareness, empathy, and compassion drive meaningful connection, where we can work together to create a new narrative in our schools, organizations, and communities that says it's okay to be more than just one kind of human, that I see you and accept you as a whole human being, that I celebrate your differences, that you belong. Simple, but not easy. The realities of the pandemic, coupled with the horrific murders of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and the most recent mass shootings in Atlanta and Boulder, have once again laid bare the very real socioeconomic, racial, ethnic, and gender inequities that continue to exist in this country. They've reignited a heightened level of awareness and demand for social justice and racial justice, and created an urgency in schools and workplaces for more diversity and inclusion. But diversity and inclusion are more than special initiatives or training programs, something to be checked off a list. They're about weaving together a diversity of perspectives into the fabric of our culture by amplifying and elevating the voices of traditionally underrepresented groups. Diversity and inclusion form the foundation upon which cultures of equity and climates of belonging are created. Belonging is different from inclusion because inclusion still implies an otherness. Inclusion is like someone opening the door and inviting others to sit at the table. But just having a seat at the table isn't enough if you don't feel like you actually belong at the table. Belonging is about more than just having access. It's about sitting at the table and having the right to use your voice to co-create with every other person in the room. Belonging is where we acknowledge, honor, and experience our shared humanity. We cannot claim to be diverse, values-based organizations founded on principles like critical thinking, fairness, accountability, equity, and inclusion if the systems that create the cultures and climates in our schools and organizations are based on a single set of experiences, perspectives, and ways of being in the world. Creating resilient and diverse schools, organizations, and communities filled with happy and healthy people requires us to shift towards building human-centered cultures that are based on a diversity of perspectives, that promote psychological safety, and allow us to see and connect with each other as whole human beings who exist beyond the classroom or workplace. Trying to compartmentalize our lives into one-size-fits-all boxes is no longer an acceptable option. It never really was, but but especially not now, as the lines between home and work continue to blur and our societal demographics begin to shift as a new generation of humans enter our schools and workplaces, demanding more from us, demanding better from us. Jewell College stands as a beacon of human-centered culture. It isn't always perfect, but perfection should never be the aim. It's Jewell's forward-leaning willingness to champion brave spaces, to celebrate critical thinking and promote real conversations that creates above-the-line thinkers and allows professors like Dr. Chance to create what he did all those years ago in that classroom, and again in his beautiful opening remarks today. A human-centered experience that made me feel seen, that made me feel connected, that made me feel like I belonged. That experience 23 years ago planted a seed of inspiration that ultimately led me to a career in service of the most vulnerable populations around the world. A career that has given me the opportunity to positively impact the lives of thousands of people. And if the ripple effects of a single experience can have such a profound and far-reaching impact, imagine what would be possible if more people felt like they belonged. Thank you again for this great honor. I look forward to the day when we can all be together again, but until then, I wish you all well. Thank you.